Hi everyone, Igor from Vinousreverie, the shop for the adventurous wine drinker. Anna's going to join us in a second. We have a special guest today, Jeff Milar. He's from GPS Wine Brokers, and we're going to talk about special champagne today. So it's a pretty cool episode. You know, this is obviously champagne season, and I think we'll be tasting a pretty good one.
Yeah?
So, yes.
Yeah, this one looks good. Yeah. Well, I think that it's not really a party or holidays without bubbles.
Yes, that's Anna's voice you guys are hearing right now.
Well, who else could it be? I'll be there in a minute.
Yes.
We're just waiting for Jeff to join, right? And
yeah,
he's with, remind me again?
GPS. GPS is the name of the company that he works for, yeah.
All right.
So they're pretty cool. They have actually a lot of cool wines from Australia in their portfolio.
Okay.
But you know, they have nice German wines, some pretty cool small California producers. So yeah, it's it's a nice eclectic mix. So.
Awesome.
So
cool.
Yeah, so you know, guys, champagne is kind of it's a wine that's the grapes to different regions to different years. But this is a special cuvée that's single and everything.
Hey,
it's our special
Hi,
guest.
Jeff.
Greetings.
Hi,
greetings.
how
Greetings.
Are you?
Yes.
Good.
Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on in.
Thanks for having me.
I know. Well, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and formally introduce yourself? We were killing some time talking about you, but I think it's better coming from you.
So my name is Jeffrey Milar. I work for a very small distributor that covers all of California called Grand Place Selections. We deal in primarily like very high-end niche wine that you tend to find in like a lot of shops like yours, as well as kind of higher end restaurants. And yeah, we're just kind of irking along like everyone else right now. So we have a niche market. So here we are.
Yeah. Tell me, if you don't mind, I just like to ask everybody this. How did you get into wine?
So I've been working in restaurants my entire life. And I've been working as a floor somm since my early 20s. I'm in my 30s now. And when I moved to the Bay, which I think it was like 5-6 years ago, another very close friend of mine was running a restaurant in the Mission. And he had bragged to me about having gotten all of his, I guess, wine academia paid for via the restaurant group, and being competitive with him. I got jealous, so I joined on heading a beverage program at another restaurant across the street where they're paying for my training. And
very nice.
I went through all of my training as a result of it, took over a wine program, and I guess that's how it started. And then it's been a journey through a handful of different things since then. So
cool.
Out of curiosity, what are the restaurants of your friend and the restaurant that you worked for?
My friend worked at Namugaji on 18th in the Mission, and I worked at Delfina on 18th in the Mission. So like literally right across from each other.
Cool. Yeah, I'm familiar with Delfina. Yeah, okay. So pretty cool.
Yeah, so my formal start with building a list once I reintegrated into the restaurant industry was in a primarily Italian restaurant with a little bit of California as well, but primarily Italy. So
yeah.
And that part of Mission, they have great restaurants. I mean, there's a row of several blocks that just, renowned restaurants, highly acclaimed with spectacular wine lists.
Correct. It's like, I mean, that's kind of what jumped off like the entire like food scene in the Mission, and hence the Bay. And it's still a really cool area to be in. So a lot of fun, and like really happy to kind of bust my chops there. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. We used to go there.
Yeah, I love the Mission. Yeah. It was definitely cool. So do you want to talk a little bit about this wine that we're tasting today?
Yeah, so the wine. So Jeff, I was thinking maybe, can you give an overall impression or overview of champagne? One of the things that I still get from a lot of my customers is they interchangeably talk about sparkling wine and champagne. You probably hear the same thing. And I always have to ask them, are you talking about sparkling wine, or are you talking about champagne from Champagne? So can you kind of give a little overview of Champagne, then we'll jump into specifically this producer.
Totally. So, I mean, perfect marketing on behalf of Champagne, where they happen to corner a market where they've trademarked the slogan Champagne for it has to be called Champagne if it's from Champagne. And if it's not, then you can't call it that.
Yeah.
That's point one. It's synonymous with any type of celebration or excitement in any type of way. It essentially is like, from an advertising perspective, every single thing that you would want your brand to be associated with, they've done for 400 years now. And then a very loose breakdown since that is, I mean, it's essentially any sparkling wine that's done essentially within a large format barrel or stainless type of production. It has some type of human intervention to it, and then it's thrown into the bottle. And there's 4 regions there. The wine that we're drinking today is from Milar, which is the Côte de Blanc, which is in the Marne, one of the 4 regions. It's known primarily for being really high-end Chardonnay. Everyone has a different cru, Premier Cru, Grand Cru, so different classifications within Champagne. Pretty much any producer will label anything as being a Premier Cru site, just in terms of general marketing there. We happen to have one that is a Grand Cru site, so slightly older vines, slightly more sought after in terms of fruit, and yeah, it's a region that is historically known for very rich Chardonnay that most producers you've probably drank have put some of it in their bottle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you want to show the bottle, and maybe we'll go straight to the to this particular Champagne. And let me kind of, I guess, Jeff, preface this with saying that Champagne is kind of associated with blends. Different vineyards, different grapes. There's 3 potential grapes: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and different vintages. So when you see a non-vintage Champagne, that's because it's a combination of several vintages. But this is a very unique Champagne in a sense. It's a Blanc de Blanc, which is a Chardonnay. It's a vintage Champagne from 2011, and it actually comes from a single vineyard, which I think is very, very unusual. At least it was until recently.
Correct. So, oftentimes, like marketing with anywhere else in wine in general, the more specific you can get, the more clout you want to have behind the bottle. So we have a specific vineyard that they want to showcase, and we have a vintage that they want to showcase. And the way that it typically works in terms of classifications within Champagne is that every producer decides during a very good vintage that they want to declare a vintage for that bottling. And what that means is that they're taking all of the fruit from that year that they're declaring the vintage and putting it into the bottle. Because Champagne is a very temperate region, lots of times you have not good years for grapes, in which case you're going to blend multiple vintages and call it a non-vintage Champagne. In this case, an interesting fact about it is 2011 isn't known, generally speaking, as a strong vintage in Champagne. And kind of like a smirk to that is like 2011 being slightly smaller as a vintage on the bottle, which they kind of just like taper it at the very top, as opposed to like 2012 or 2010, which are these blockbuster numbers on a bottle as a vintage, saying like, we have a really great vintage here, please buy it. It's more expensive, it's more lauded, blah, 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 blah. But the significance of 11 being marked as the vintage on the Gonnet is there's a really famous sommelier in Paris, Marco Pelletier, who actually started working with the Gonnet family, Michel Gonnet specifically, in 2011, and this is their inaugural vintage, working on a bottle together. So it's kind of the first bottling from one of the oldest families in Champagne, coming
Yes.
from the 15th century, and one of the most known wine professionals in Paris, working together to blend a cuvee from a Grand Cru site.
Yeah,
in
I
a
did
really
see
old
that there were
territory.
7 generations of owned wineries, so I thought that was spectacular. Like a
Right.
long winemaking.
And Jeff, I don't know if you saw it. I was showing the map, so I kind of circled, where the site is, which I'm assuming is the village, right, where the wine comes from.
Correct.
Mesnil, is that
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's a Grand
That's the
Cru.
village, and then you just get deeper into the sites once you're in the village. So it's kind of like you're driving around an area, and you say, we live in the Bay,
Yes.
and then I live in Oakland, but then we're specifically in Oakland. I live by the lake, but I live on a really good street by the lake that you all want to live on this street. And it's no different in terms of anything you can put on there to make it more extravagant and well-known and just call attention to that specificity. You're going to do it.
That's pretty cool. And I'm sure you had this champagne several times. So, while you were talking,
You tasted the wine.
I tasted it. And on the
I had it
nose, it
before.
was spectacular. I mean, it just jumped out at you. And such a long finish. So I don't know if you could, if you recall what the tasting notes are. And if
You probably taste a lot, though. I don't know if you remember.
Right. So, one of the biggest components of the champagne specifically, which I think is one of the coolest things about it is disgorged upon us ordering it. So disgorging basically means they shoot out all of the dead cells in it, they rebottle it, and they ship it out to us. And when this happens, they're basically taking it from resting. And in this case, it's been resting 8 years on its lees. So all of those dead cells that are part of the process of fermentation that add to the richness, the texture, the complexity that makes champagne such a fun thing to drink, is basically being disgorged upon request for us when we order it. So I say that as an aside to talk about tasting notes specifically, because when you have a champagne that sees extended lees contact, in this case 8 years such, you're going to find one that's going to be much toastier. So you get all of those kind of brioche, all of those kind of burnt butter, brown butter, just very rich, kind of almost oxidized, sugary, decadent flavors, in addition to a linearity from a lot of fresh fruit. That is the result of really old Chardonnay from really good soils in a really good area. So you have all of those fresh stone fruits as well melding with it.
Yes.
The acid cutting through it. So you kind of have that combination of both rich oxidized tones as well as fresh stone fruity tones as well.
No, it's really good. Yeah, I wrote down citrus, warm bread, mineral, long saline finish. Very, very long.
Correct.
It just keeps going.
You got it.
Yeah.
And you were talking about being specific earlier on. So there's actually, at least what I've noticed, and you probably know this better than I do, is there's a pricing structure to champagnes. So typically non-vintage champagnes are kind of on the lower end of the price. And then vintage and what I noticed, Blanc de Blancs, they're higher end price. So I'm selling this for $60, and that's a spectacular price for Grand Cru Blanc de Blanc vintage champagne. And the quality is unbelievable. I think we were mentioning before, you have a quote from Jancis, and she gave it 18 points, which is almost unheard of score for wine this price point, for champagne this price point. So, so I'm not sure if you follow her, but that definitely impressed me and it kind of jumped out to me. And you actually have a quote from her where
I did. Yeah. So I was reading Jancis Robinson's review, and I saw it was 18 out of 20, which is a huge score for her. But I also saw that she wrote, it really stood out for me. This is the first wine, she says, that I have found difficult to expectorate. First of all, I want to applaud her use of the word expectorate, because this is a great word use. But yeah, she's a wine critic. She probably tastes so many wines. So I really thought it was interesting that she said she had trouble spitting it out. So it's really good.
One of the most fun things that we've had selling this wine specifically, as opposed to the other grower producers that we have in our portfolio, is the fact that because we order it and it's disgorged for us, we see so much variation from shipment to shipment.
Okay.
In addition to it having a little bit more lees contact than other champagnes, really makes it something that you see a difference in richness month after month from showing it and tasting it, which makes it a lot of fun to drink and and play around with. So yeah, and I mean, to speak to your point about non-vintage as well, it's always exciting to have something that has a date after it and has a story behind it. And non-vintage bottlings tend to be higher in production, and tend to lend themselves to uniformity of the producer, which is not a bad thing at all. That's part of the magic of champagne. But the more specific you can get with a date after it, the more nuance and the more fun you have drinking it.
Right.
And this is just one of the examples of how wine almost I don't know, has a mind of its own. You were saying this is the first vintage that the champagne was made by the two people who were making that.
Correct.
And a vintage that was not considered that good, but the wine itself turned out to be spectacular. So yeah.
I mean, excellent bottling that kind of everything could have gone right for a year that everyone was worried about. It's been received really, really well in California as well as everywhere. And it makes it exciting to see how they're going to grow year after year when we get more of it. Actually, you guys got one of the last shipments that we have of it. So when it's gone, that's it for the year.
Yeah. No, I was definitely very excited. I'm glad I got it. Jeff, I think that was a pretty cool overview. The one question I asked, it's funny because I know there's a lot of niche, high-end Australian wines in your portfolio that are very interesting, and other things in it. And you were mentioning, obviously, you worked in the Mission, so you know all the great restaurants and all the great wine lists in those restaurants. Working in the East Bay, in my opinion, somebody who grew up in San Francisco, used to dine a lot in San Francisco. Now look living in the East Bay, especially in Contra Costa County, it's kind of more conservative wine list. And I always feel like there's always opportunity to make it a little more exciting. And I think your portfolio has quite a few things that will, make the wine list more exciting. I mean, I know right now it's obviously a lot of the restaurants are only going to go orders, but you always have to be thinking about how to excite the public with something new, something unique, and something exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Native as well, and I mean, something that's fun about GPS specifically is that the wines are kind of so niche and artisanal in a way that it really lends itself to restaurants that kind of go by the same creed. So you're not going to find our book specifically in a lot of larger scale restaurants in a lot of ways. You're going to find them in those independent, family-owned, smaller businesses, typically higher end or a little bit more niche in terms of cuisine, because our wines fit in the same way in that regard. And it's like a partnership with anything else. So being a small distributor with that, restaurants like that tend to lend themselves to us, just like they tend to lend themselves to local agriculture as well, to create like its kind of own like niche world and where we are in the Bay, which is a really cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
Cool.
This was a fun overview. I mean, thank you so much for joining us, Jeff. A really cool overview about this exciting and unique champagne. I had fun. I hope everybody else.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Great to see you again after a year or so. But I know we exchange emails, but it's great to see you in person. And
good to see you all too.
Happy holidays to you, and thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for joining us for our weekly show for the Adventurous Wine Drinker, and we'll see you guys next Friday.
Thank you.
Okay,
bye, guys.
Bye.